Imagine you're standing on a street corner on a sunny summer day. It's June 28th, 1914. The city is Sarajevo. You see a fancy car, an open-topped convertible, slowly making its way down the street. In the back sits a man in a plumed helmet and his elegant wife. This is Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the massive Austro-Hungarian Empire. This is a man whose future seems written in stone. He is royalty, he is power. But in a few moments, none of that will matter. A single person, a young man with a pistol, is about to change the world forever. The young man's name was Gavrilo Princip. He was a Serbian nationalist, part of a group that wanted to break away from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Earlier that day, an attempt on the Archduke's life with a bomb had failed. It seemed like the danger had passed. But history is strange. A wrong turn by the driver placed the Archduke's car directly in front of Princip. He stepped forward, he raised his pistol, he fired 2 shots. The world held its breath. That single act, those 2 gunshots, was the spark. But a spark is useless without something to ignite. And Europe in 1914 was a powder keg waiting for a flame. The air was thick with tension, a kind of invisible pressure that everyone could feel but no one could quite see. The great powers of the continent were like boxers in a ring, circling each other, muscles tensed, waiting for the first punch. They had been building up their armies for years. They had been building up their navies for years, each one trying to outdo the other in a massive, continent-wide arms race. It was a strange and terrifying logic. To keep the peace, you had to prepare for the most terrible war imaginable. So when the news from Sarajevo crackled across the telegraph wires, it landed on fertile ground for conflict. It wasn't just about an assassination, as horrific as that was. It was about honor. It was about pride. It was about old grudges, deep-seated fears. The death of the Archduke gave the Austro-Hungarian Empire the reason it had been looking for. A reason to crush its troublesome neighbor, Serbia, once and for all. They saw this as their chance to reassert their dominance. But they weren't the only ones with a plan. Everyone had a plan. And all the plans involved their armies. Well, you know. To understand what happened next, you have to picture Europe as a web of secret promises. These were the alliances, the deals made in shadowy back rooms between kings, emperors, and politicians. Germany was tied to Austria-Hungary. Russia was tied to Serbia. Russia was also tied to France. Britain had a looser, but still serious, understanding with France, with Russia. It was a system designed to create a balance of power, a kind of security blanket. But what it really created was a tripwire. If one nation went to war, the whole system pulled everyone else in. It was a doomsday machine of their own making. Then there was the fuel of nationalism. In the early 20th century, people were more passionate than ever about their own country, their own flag, their own people. In the Balkans, often called the powder keg of Europe, this was true. Various ethnic groups, like the Serbs, dreamed of creating independent nations, free from rule by Austria-Hungary, the Ottomans. This desire for self-rule could not be contained. And we can't forget the race for empire. The great powers weren't content with European borders. They had spent decades scrambling for colonies across Africa, Asia, competing for resources, markets, global prestige. This rivalry created grievances and near misses. Britain worried about Germany's growing navy. Germany felt it deserved its place in the sun. France still stung from defeat decades earlier. These ambitions added paranoia and aggression. Everyone played a high-stakes game for global dominance. So when Austria-Hungary issued a brutal ultimatum to Serbia on July 28, 1914, it was more than a demand for justice. It was a test, a challenge. The demands were almost impossible to accept. Serbia, with its back against the wall, accepted most of them but rejected a few key points. That was all the excuse Austria-Hungary needed. On July 28, 1914, they declared war on Serbia. The first domino had been pushed. The tangled web of alliances pulled tight, dragging nation after nation toward the abyss. Well, The declaration of war on Serbia set off a chain reaction that was both terrifying and unstoppable. The gears of the great war machines began to turn. Russia, seeing itself as the great protector of the Slavic peoples, including the Serbs, once you started that process, it was incredibly hard to stop. It was a declaration of intent. Germany saw Russia's mobilization and panicked. Their entire war plan, the famous Schlieffen Plan, depended on speed. They had to defeat France quickly in the west before the slow-moving Russian giant could fully bring its power to bear in the east. For the German generals, Russia's mobilization was a ticking clock. On August 1, 1914, Germany declared war on Russia. 2 days later, on August 3, they declared war on France. The logic was cold and brutal. To defend their ally, Austria-Hungary, they had to attack Russia. And to attack Russia, they first had to attack France. To get to France, the German army had to march through neutral Belgium. This was a shocking violation of international law, but for the German military, it was a practical necessity. They saw Belgium as nothing more than a road to Paris. But for Great Britain, it was the final straw. Britain had long promised to protect Belgian neutrality. More importantly, it could not accept the idea of a hostile German army controlling the Channel ports just across from its own shores. On August 4, 1914, Great Britain declared war on Germany. In just over a week, a regional dispute had exploded into a continental catastrophe. The people of Europe, for the most part, greeted the news with a strange, euphoric excitement. Crowds gathered in the streets of Berlin, Paris, London, cheering, singing patriotic songs, waving flags. Young men rushed to enlist, afraid the war would be over before they could get their share of the glory. They called it the Great Adventure. "The boys will be home by Christmas," was the common refrain. No one, not the generals, not the politicians, and certainly not the cheering crowds, could possibly imagine the horror that was about to be unleashed. The dream of a quick war died almost immediately. It died in the mud and blood of the Western Front. After the initial German advance was halted just outside Paris, the fighting bogged down into a brutal stalemate. Both sides dug into the earth, creating a vast, hellish network of trenches. That line stretched nearly 500 miles from the North Sea to the Swiss border,